Hey guys, hope everything's going well. Uh, Today we have a returning guest. It is Ryan McClanahan. Hey Ryan, how's it going? Thanks for coming on.
Good. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Okay, good, good. For those watching, I have issues with my laptop, so I'm doing this on my phone. But let's look at a few comments right now. No. All right.
Oh,
So sorry about that. Okay,
yeah.
let's look at a few comments. I'm here for the Marvel PMGs. Oh boy, those have been going crazy. Have you heard about the Marvel PMGs that have gone down 90%, or you've been following them?
Only through you. I,
Only through me?
yeah, yeah. I'm not a big fan of Marvel or Disney,
Okay,
but I do follow this stuff just because. So,
okay. All right. Egyptian Hebrew Sports Card Radio gave you big props today. Oh yeah. I think I got like 100 subscribers after that shout out. That's crazy. Intense. And yeah, so anyways, there's been a lot that has gone on since I brought you on. And one of the topics that a lot of people got got me in trouble for was the Kurtz card care, where he apparently uses his own solution to clean cards and people buy his product. So what are your thoughts on cleaning cards? I know you're a collector
yeah.
and people have different points of view. And yeah, so let me know your thoughts about that.
I'm a collector and a journalist, and I do a lot of research into sports cards. But I think there's a gray area there. As long as you tell the person who is buying the card that you did this, I think it would be okay. It's up to the person who is purchasing the card. But then what happens afterwards is if that person decides to sell the card, tell the that person that they're selling the card to that been, I guess, cleaned. Or some cards I know that have been gone to a contributor, such as I think a 1934 Gaudi Lou Gehrig, and it's a little bit different, I know, but the way that the 1933 and 34 Gaudis were, I guess, manufactured is that you can actually take little strips of what's in the card and kind of like insert cleaner strips, if you will, from another card. So I know that's been done. And there's been other ways that collectors and dealers have kind of, I guess, uh, conserved cards, if you will. And some of these are really good, and some of them are not. Um, I kind of want to know if the card that I am buying is or has been either pressed or take having the creases out or whatever the case may be. I want to know if that's the case. And I know for some cards, a lot of the auction houses, they're not going to really say it, but if you look at some of the cards in the auction houses, uh, your tobacco cards specifically, um, they look really nice, like probably too nice, and you have to kind of like ask yourself what has happened to these cards to make them look the a lot of times they've said that cards have been bleached, and that's probably the case. Although they're not going to obviously tell you that they've bleached the cards before they've put them in the auction or whatever. But I think there's a gray area there, and it's really up to the person who's purchasing the card to they need to have as much information uh, beforehand to make that purchase. And so, it's I don't know, it's really difficult. I personally want to know if the card that I am buying has been altered in some way.
Yeah, I mean, I'm the same way as well, but when I go online, I wouldn't be surprised if half the cards people did some sort of cleaning. And I'm not talking about just using a microfiber cloth,
Yeah.
which a lot of people in the hobby are okay with. I'm talking about actual chemicals that are being used. And I got blowback for this topic, which is fine. But based on the responses that I got, it seems that this is a this is practiced in the hobby, that a lot of people do that. And now begs the question, so does PSA have the ability, or these grading companies, do you think, to determine these? I don't think they do.
Um, I okay. So if you're talking about like modern and vintage, it's different, right? So all cards are going to exhibit some kind of smell to them just through the aging process. And if it's a modern card, obviously you have different, I guess, resins, if you will, that are applied to the card, and there are certain chemical smells that you can, I guess, differentiate with modern and vintage. I mean, when you open up a brand new pack, the first thing you smell is that resin, and I would suspect that PSA being in the game as long as they have, they know what to um, you know find. They know what is supposed to be there and what isn't. Now the problem there becomes time. So how long is PSA or any other companies spending grading these cards, and do they really want to really kind of get invested? I mean, I am kind of a critic of PSA and grading cards in general. I do have them in my collection, but when I'm purchasing a graded card, it is not for the holder. It's for the card itself, and it's kind of like a guarantee. Not all cards need to be graded, but the thing is, I think that they probably don't have the time to actually dive into all this. And we don't know how long they're actually taking to grade the card too. Um, it could be that they're actually taking more time with the more amount of money that they get for the card. So, you know, not to be all conspiratorial, but I think that might be the case.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously a money-making operation. And we know that Collectors Universe is well funded with Nat Turner's group and Steve Cohn, a billionaire.
Right.
And one of the companies they own is PCGS, which is a coin company. And I don't send cards for grade, I mean, coins for grading, but I do have some bullion at home. And it's a huge no-no to alter coins.
Yeah.
And they can detect with their technology if it's been altered using a chemical. And they could grade it, right? They're just going to put it with a asterisk, like if it's cleaned, if it's altered, etc. So I believe that, okay, if PCGS has that technology, I'm pretty sure PSA has that technology as well.
Yeah, they could. We just don't know because we're the stupid public. um, I remember actually when PSA first came to the scene, and they actually Collectors Universe actually back in the 1980s they actually kind of had to go into the sports card field because of the coin grading scandal in the 1980s. So I remember that, and I also remember too that there was a time when nobody trusted graded cards. They didn't know what to make of it too, so they kind of steered clear of it. And over time, people kind of gravitated towards graded memorabilia cards. You kind of like, unfortunately, you're kind of um, taking out the investigation for yourself, the research for yourself when you buy a graded card, and you're leaving up to a third party, and human nature is what it is, but not everybody is correct, not even me, and I make a lot of mistakes too, and it's human. um, but I think we kind of um, I guess rely too much on third party grading, and not on what we actually see. And the more shows you go to and the more cards that you see, the better you're going to be in the long run. I mean, after all, like real this is for a lot of people. It is something that they're paying a lot of money for, and I am pretty careful not to get ripped off, but that can happen to anybody, even the most seasoned person in the hobby can get taken advantage of. But the more you know, the less that's going to happen.
Indeed, indeed. So I know you sent me an email, sticking with PSA. There was a scandal a few years ago where PSA had to pay out a lot of money based on items that were graded, which came out to be altered or counterfeit. And you told me that they had to pay a huge sum because that's what Collectors Universe does. If they grade something that's altered or counterfeit and it's in a slab. And do you think that would open up Pandora's box if they just crack down on chemical use and was harder on altered cards? Because I did a video, I don't know if you saw it. There's a Conor McDavid card, hockey player,
I saw
and it
that.
appears that there was some trimming going on based on the pictures that I've seen on Blowout. And if they were just to open up Pandora's box, I think Collectors Universe could be on the hook for a lot of money to pay out.
So this was back in 2018, and if you had read the 2018 and 2019 quarterly reports from Collectors Universe, they pretty much said that they didn't have the finances to pay out for all these trimmed cards that were being graded, and people asking for their money back. They didn't have the money, nor did they have the correct amount of employees at the time. They had known about this since at least 2015, and at the same time too was that there was a a scandal where PSA and a few other companies were grading fake autographs, T206s and 1933 Gaudis and Bowman as well. And both of these cases have not really they they haven't been solved. I just say that it's still, there are still open cases. Um, the autographed grading scandal to me is really remarkable, just because they were not autographing your high end baseball players. It was more your guys that would really kind of no one would ever suspect that. I think there was one ball player, and I can't remember off the top of my head, but he's not known to have an autograph during his lifetime on any cards. And so what they were doing was they were taking the forgers were taking 3x5s of these ball players, and that's how they got their autographs. And they were copying the autograph from those 3x5s, I think it was really sloppy work on the part of the grading companies, the authenticating companies as well. So, and the PSA stuff and Beckett as well. It's really astounding, and a lot of people got hurt in that. And there's still autographs that we don't know how many are out there that they've done, and they never caught the individuals.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. I was doing some research earlier on, I think it was was it Bullpen or Ballpark? One of those.
Operation Bullpen. That was in the 1990s. That was Greg.
Yeah, 1990s.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I know it's different, but I was looking into that, and one of the dudes was forging, I believe, Mickey Mantle autographs.
Yeah, it was
So,
Greg Marino, and he,
right.
he forged quite a number of these, and he was really, really good. The thing is, money gets involved, and they're making so much money, which led to their downfall. And then there was another guy named Rogers, and he actually he actually stole the Brace collection, the George Brace collection. And he was selling photographs that were stolen, and I think memorabilia as well. And he's actually on an episode of American Greed. And if you come across that, I think you'd really enjoy it. Let me get to Chris C here for a minute because he's got something really interesting. Um, so holding people who commit fraud accountable is it's really it's really difficult today, and having regulations. If you want to change, who do you want to regulate? You don't want the government to regulate this stuff because that just goes down a deep dark rabbit hole, and you don't know what's going to end up. Uh, it could seriously affect the hobby in negative ways by having the government really kind of regulate the stuff. What I would kind of suggest is that the Federal Trade Commission actually probably do an investigation. They've done investigations on the hobby before, and they've kind of squared things away with tops and flair back in the 1960s and the 1980s as well. But for the most part, I don't think it would be very good to actually have a truly government regulated hobby. What I would think is that something better would be that you have basically everything consolidated, where you don't have each and every grading company um, have their own standards, just have one standard. And then, I've heard this for years and years that that's what needs to happen. We had this back in the 1980s with Beckett, and it seemed to work pretty well. So I don't, white collar fraud is, it's not really taken very seriously for the most part. And it could now because the money that's coming into the hobby it's greater than I think it's ever been before.
Oh yeah, there's a ton of money coming into the hobby, seeing these record sales on the auctions.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's some hanky panky, my favorite term, is going on these auction houses, but that's maybe a topic for a different day. But in terms of regulation, I mean, I don't want to get too much into politics, but I don't want Nancy Pelosi or Mitch McConnell getting involved in the hobby. Like,
Yeah,
no offense. I'm not calling out either
yeah,
party. I just don't trust people that don't know this hobby well, and then they want to put regulation. I think that is a slippery slope, in my opinion.
yeah. The funny thing is that the hobby is it's actually a lot of it has been not regulated, but really kind of influenced by politics and legislation, and that goes back to I want to say about maybe the late 1890s, and it's not the fact that we have guys and girls like Nancy Pelosi and Mitch McConnell studying sports cards, but it's what happens to the companies that are issuing sports cards that have really been regulated and influenced greatly by the political decisions that people make. And I'll just give you a small example. You have the 1895 Harvesters Trust case, and that was the income tax. Now that was declared unconstitutional the year after, in I think 1896 or so, and then from that, you have the 16th Amendment, and that kind of abolished the alcohol, tobacco, and the tariffs that our tobacco cards basically were one of the reasons how the government got its money. But then once you didn't have that, you didn't have tobacco cards either. And then the debt from World War One was one of the reasons that caused the Great Depression, and that ended up well, it kind of destroyed some of the companies that were issuing sports cards. So those are some of the ways that uh, you know the politics of the country and the economy have entered the hobby, if you will.
Good points. Okay, let's take a look at some comments here. Egyptian Hebrew, people will do anything to increase the value of their cards. I totally agree with that, especially what we saw with the Herbert sale, the $1 million sale. Jack Goat, lots of criminals in this hobby. I don't buy in-person signed cards, even if they are graded. Yeah, I'm iffy on buying expensive cards now, especially what I have discovered and tips that I've received over the past 6 months.
So buying in-person cards, signed cards, a lot of the cards that I have are vintage, and a lot of them are autographed as well. I think that you need to do your homework on the ball player, and not just that, but if you're gonna buy a signed card, it's some ball players like Johnny Pesky. Nobody would ever think to forge a Johnny Pesky autograph, or even Bob Feller. But you really kind of need to do your homework, and not just on the autograph of the ball player, but the ink as well, and how this autograph could have been signed, and just the era in which the ball player lived as well. If the ball player had any kind of injuries, or just through age, your autograph is going to change. It can be a roll of the dice, certainly. And I've actually witnessed this before, but a friend of mine had he had sent in probably $4,000 worth of autographed merchandise to get graded, and he had witnessed all of it being signed, and it was all musicians, and so rock and roll dudes, and so PSA came back and they said half of it was no good, and he had photographs to prove that all of the stuff was legitimate. So that was a real cause of concern for me, because again, you're relying on somebody through a grading company that you don't know what their background is, their expertise, how they actually go about figuring out if the autograph is worth it, or if it's legitimate. I have seen an autograph of Cliff Chambers. I think there's a picture for the Pirates in the 1950s, and his autograph looked like cat scratches. Now, I couldn't tell you if that was legitimate or not. I think he had a stroke, but the fact is that the grading company said it was legitimate, and they passed it on as authentic. So again, I would have thought that anybody could have done this autograph. It just looked so shaky, and that's the problem. Is that again, I wrote an article about this where you had a bunch of ball players really kind of hey Chris, how you doing, buddy? You have a lot of ball players who just sign cat scratches. Just it's awful, and you know um I would think that there's really some kind of obviously you really need to be careful of what you're buying today, just because these autographs are so bad. Modern players, there's no there's really no, I guess, accountability there. I mean, if I'll put it to you this way, Raul, if I'm a company and I ask the ball player to autograph maybe 50, 60, 70 cards, I would want to make sure that each and every one of those autographs is legible and it is presentable because that's their name. It is. It's their reputation on the line. The autograph company, the company that's issuing those cards, and it's also kind of lazy on the part of the ball players as well. I've seen some horrible, horrible autographs too. So
Yeah. All right, let's go through some. I totally agree with you there. Let's just look through some comments. Mervin, how's it going? What's your stance on polishing the actual slab to remove scratches? I don't think there's anything wrong with it. Do you see anything?
no, I would. If the card that I have, I can't see it because there's like scratches on the slab itself. I'm gonna try to fix that so it's presentable. Again, I'm not collecting the grading company. I'm collecting the card. So, and again, who knows how long that these things are gonna last in these holders too. Back in the early '80s, there was a huge issue with the PVC sleevings that kids were putting or collectors were putting their cards in, and it turned, I guess, yellow and kind of destroyed their cards. So they fixed that in the mid '80s, but it took a while. So you know, who knows?
Yeah, just speaking of that, just the chemicals, you also made a very wise point. What will happen to these cards if chemicals are used? And you stated something that in the some of the older cards, the ink is fading off because of the oils they used, I believe you're telling me.
The Yeah, so it's the Sharpie, the way that the ink in the Sharpie is, it's really kind of degraded over years, some faster than others. And I think I had pointed out the T206, I'm sorry, the 1912 T207s. So way back in the day, what they did is, I believe that MG, yeah. Um, Comment. They do have a database for autographs that they go by. Um, yeah. Anyway, so the T207s, they used like a linseed oil to protect the cards, and they did this for a few other sets as well. Um, and yeah, Egyptian, yeah. And so over time, the linseed oil has cracked the surface of the cards, the T207s and others. So um, we don't actually know what was going to happen to the modern cards. That obviously they're not using linseed oil today. They are using some kind of a form of resin, and again, we just don't know what's going to happen to a lot of the modern cards over the next 20, 30, 50, 60, even 100 years. And autographs too, the pens, um, that everything fades after a while. It's just a part of the scientific process of what happens through age. Let's see. Um, maybe a real auto from a fake. It depends on some people have been fooled, which is why we had an Operation Bullpen. Enough people have been fooled. Um,
Even
so
experts.
yeah, even experts. You know, not we've seen a lot of experts in the hobby. Everybody's an expert, right? Including
We got YouTube experts, right? Influencers
yeah. No,
that are
but
experts.
if you don't know, if you don't know, again, like I said, if you don't know if the ball player through either age or whatever has signed, everyone signs differently over a period of time. Anything can happen through age, arthritis, anything. So your autograph will change over time, and it could be legit, and PSA could say no, that autograph is not legit. So unless you have like photographic evidence or video evidence, I think PSA may have a point on some of this stuff. But
It's true.
again, yeah.
It's true. All right, let's look at this comment. I want to tie into one of the topics we talked about earlier, and I know you messaged me earlier saying that we should talk about the Federal Reserve, and I'm going to tie it to this comment. So this comment says regulations needed to stop the conflicts of interest and the fact that card companies can't even honor redemption. So I'm going to tie this into the Fed. So as we know, 2020 printed a lot of money. Yeah, the pandemic.
Yep.
Prices skyrocketed. Card companies made millions and millions of dollars. And then we saw, in my opinion, a bunch of conflicts of interest. I've stated that Collectors Universe, they started out buying a bunch of things, right? They bought Card Ladder, they bought Wata Games, they just own a lot in this industry. And just looking at that, and they also have Golden, obviously. So when you have that, people are going to point, hey, conflict of interest. That's what I think. And then there's Panini. Panini doesn't really care about redemptions. That's what it's looking like, or they can't get the athletes to sign. So I'd say that a lot of conflicts of interest because of all this funny money and all this government intervention. And I don't know if you think it the same way. Maybe you have a different opinion with the conflicts of interest.
So I think this is a very interesting thing because it looks like first any conflict of interest should be brought up with the Federal Trade Commission to look into it. And there have been conflicts of interest in the sports card hobbies going back to the 1950s. However, now it's just kind of been wrapped up because of the pandemic and all the money. Obviously, acquisitions back in the 90s have occurred quite frequently after the 1994 strike. I think that it is really very concerning that you really kind of essentially, when you wipe away everything, you're probably going to look at maybe 2 or 3 companies that own the majority of this. And I would actually think that having one company, such as maybe Fanatics, owning all the licenses for sports cards, to produce sports cards, that to me is concerning because you're looking at essentially monopolization, and that's not good for anybody. It's not good for business. It's not good for the collector. And we did actually see some of this with Beckett back in, I think, maybe the very early 2000s, and they were kind of like told, like you can't sell you have to split. You can't grade your cards and then sell your cards on your platform or something to that effect. So it was kind of regulated then. Conflicts of interest here really need to be investigated. I think, and I think there are. I really do. There could even be conflicts of interest with PSA and eBay, but that's up to the Federal Trade Commission, and not, to my knowledge, nobody has reached out to them and asked them to look into this stuff to make sure that everything is on the level. Is everything on the level? I don't think so. It doesn't look like it.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that if the government does, say, hey, this is a conflict of interest,
that's their job.
Yeah, that's just going to open up a can of worms. And I believe that the collectibles industry has provided government revenue that they haven't seen from the collectibles industry in the past. So it's one thing that I don't think they're going to touch, in my opinion.
They might not. They might not. They might look at it and decide, well, listen, we have a lot more things more important things to handle. On the other hand, the Federal Trade Commission got involved with the Topps Flair debate back in the 1960s and the 1980s. You had essentially a 10-year court case. Well, at least, yeah, from 1975 to 1985, specifically 1980, 81. So, you never know what's going to happen, especially when there's a lot of money that the consumer is purchasing your cards. And then also on top of it, you have Wall Street. You have a lot of Wall Street money too floating into the hobby. I'm not a big fan of Wall Street getting in because I don't think that those guys really know what the heck they're doing. But the one thing I think is kind of interesting is that they're purchasing a lot of high-end cards, and then I think in some cases they're issuing stock for those cards. So that's really kind of murky, I think. So
Don't you think it's weird that you're talking about Wall Street money and all the headlines came about Wall Street? I found this to be very fishy. And I did a video, I think in February or March of last year. I was saying that, hey, Wall Street's coming in, huge red flag. That's basically what I was saying. And you had all of these fractional companies buying up cards, record sales. It was insane.
Yep.
And I don't know if me being a conspiracy theorist, in quotes, I don't know if Wall Street was buying way before and then they were just dumping onto everybody else. And then you had the mainstream media saying that, oh, look, with Ken Golden, he was quoted, I think in CNN saying that, hey, this isn't a bubble. It's just a part of our culture or something like that. And when I was seeing mainstream media cover these, I'm thinking red flag, this thing's probably coming down hard.
Well, I mean, the mainstream media has covered the hobby since the 1970s, and with Wall Street, you really kind of they're fishing for new sources of revenue, obviously, because there's so much money now that's been printed. It's really kind of funny money. The things that we're seeing with stock today and bonds, it's inflated. There's no doubt about it. You don't really know what the actual true value is of a lot of the stocks. And I really wouldn't trust the government numbers on this stuff either. The inflation, I think you could probably times that by 2 at this point. And that would make sense too if you look at what happened in the 1970s or even in the 1930s.
Yeah, yeah. So going more into the Federal Reserve, like my favorite topic. I know it may turn off some people, but you were talking earlier about how the Federal Reserve destroyed sports cards back in the day. Like, yeah, how, for those people that didn't listen to that interview, how did they destroy sports cards?
All right, so the Federal Reserve was I guess first put into practice in February of 1913. There was a guy, Nelson Aldrich, who was really a big backer of it. Same with William Howard Taft, and the simple fact is that the way that the country ended up getting its revenue was through the sin taxes, and that was alcohol, tobacco, and then tariffs. Well, unfortunately I don't have any. No, I don't have any tobacco cards with me right now. But I'll just for example, say this is a T206 on the back of the card here. there would be a factory number, and that was for the Internal Revenue Service at the time, the Revenue Service, and that's how they would track how much revenue that they were getting in from tobacco cards. Well, if you have a 16th Amendment now that was passed in 1913, along with the revenue, basically it kind of altered the way the country was getting the revenue through the 16th Amendment and not through the tariffs or the tobacco or alcohol, if that makes any sense. Um, that's how the tobacco companies uh, basically they were the biggest issuers of sports cards back then. So they didn't need to do this stuff really, and it also is dependent on how much money that these tobacco companies had to pay uh, basically to get their tobacco. And then, you know, so after say 1913, you didn't have tobacco cards for the most part. Um, and then in the 1930s, you had a lot of regulations because of the um, the 16th Amendment and the Federal Reserve. And all you need to do is look at a graph to see the your how much money your dollar has gone down since 1913, and it's just because we just print so much of this stuff. In the 1930s, uh, it was it was over regulation that really kind of killed a lot of the sports cards. And you know that's really accounting for the rarity. Both of those cases, that's accounting for the rarity of a lot of our sports cards from the 1910s and the 1930s. Today, I think maybe uh, we're going to see some rare cards in the very near future uh, because of the pandemic and supply chain issues. But I think maybe I, I'd have to look at to see if the Federal Reserve would have any impact on cards today. I suspect maybe so, but we're not sure yet. But the Federal Reserve really is it needs to be audited um, and it's just I don't think it worked out the way they wanted to back in 1913. Um, it just it's kind of complicated, really. But and I've written a lot about this over the years too. A little more detailed than what I'm telling you right now. But just it has affected the hobby in a lot of ways, and not just your average sports card, but um, the companies issuing particularly.
Indeed, indeed. Only thing I'd say about the Federal Reserve is that it was made at. Did you ever hear the story? It was created at Jekyll Island.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah,
I don't look at Congress writing up the rules. I was viewed as just the hanky panky
yeah,
created it.
yeah. Nelson Aldrich, I think, was there too, Jekyll Island,
Yeah.
along with I think. Oh shoot, I forget the other guys in that
I
room.
think Morgan was there, right? Pierpont Morgan.
Okay, yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, that was just a weird story, and that's how I learned about all this hanky panky in society. So
Yeah, it's definitely I've written quite extensively about that. And
yeah.
Morgan, first off, like I think he got shot where somebody tried to throw a bomb at him.
Whoa, I
um,
didn't know that.
yeah, and this is about like 1915 or so, or no, it's well before that because I think he died in like 1912. Um, it, uh, Junior and senior, right? So I kind of get the two of them confused.
Yeah.
One I know in 1907, the bankers panicked. One of the Morgans ended up just writing a check to the government that fixed the whole thing apparently. Um, and the other one I think got shot. So these guys were hated, and the fact is that it wasn't Morgan didn't actually have the majority of the money in the country, um, but I think it was John J. Astor had the most money in the country, and there was a huge disparity of wealth, obviously, and that's what got Woodrow Wilson elected in 1911, 1912. And
Yep, good history lesson. All right, let's go through some comments here. I think I saw a comment about Fanatics and having an IPO. And if they have an IPO, how has this worked out with other companies? Have you researched other companies having IPOs? I think Topps was publicly traded for a while, then they went private, they were supposed to go public, but then Fanatics came out of nowhere.
Bowman had stock as well. There was stock traded company. The American Tobacco Company also is a stock traded company. You've had a lot of companies that issued sports cards that were publicly traded. Although Fanatics, I'm not really thrilled about Fanatics just yet.
Why is that?
I think they own too much. I think that they probably unintentionally. I'm not going to go and say that all this is intentional, but just the fact that they own so many companies already, and they're into every kind of aspect, that could create, I guess, a problem for the collector. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think what they haven't done yet, which I expect them to do, is reach out to influencers on YouTube. And I think then, so they probably will be buying up Panini, right? Based on the clues that have been given.
Right.
So assuming that goes down, then they're going to probably use their marketing money to reach out to influencers. Some influencers will obviously work with them. They may have already signed deals with them right now behind closed doors. So then you'll have the mainstream media will give them, I think, a good message, or they will promote them. Then you'll have influencers on YouTube. They're not going to speak bad about them, because once you get paid money, obviously, if you talk bad about them, you'll get fired. So I understand that. So I believe that what may be worse is even control of, how they are viewed.
Yeah. I want to just kind of interject for a moment about because I know you talked about this a while ago too, is that when a company gives you money to promote their products, that should not be a license for the company to say you've towed the line or we terminate you, because that can lead them into a courtroom. Because again, if you're not actually employed by the company, then obviously the First Amendment still applies, and the First Amendment applies to companies as it does to you and I, and so they really kind of have to be careful about that. I know that a lot of people do get terminated from the I guess as spokesmen, and that happens, but at the same time, I would actually draw up a contract for that company to say that I have the right to say what I want, and if they don't agree to that, I bolt. So
I would do the same thing. Like if I'm getting sponsorship, I can criticize the company, and they obviously would not sign me up. And just like some people from the industry have reached out to me, and I said, you can come on, but I'm not going to play it easy. I'm going to ask some tough questions, right?
Sure.
And like, I don't know if you follow Joe Rogan. Do you listen to him or no?
I do, actually. Yeah, quite a bit.
Okay. Yeah, so I don't know if you noticed that Joe Rogan used to get on all types of guests with different opinions before he signed the Spotify deal. Once he signed Spotify, Spotify said that, hey, you need to get rid of these old episodes on Spotify. I
There's
think
about
one of them was like
108.
Alex Jones and all that, and guys that think like him and gals.
Yeah, I'm not a
So
fan of that.
yeah, so it did happen. So I'm just saying that Joe Rogan cannot bring on certain guests, from my understanding, on Spotify.
Well,
So tying into sports cards and influencers getting money, they can speak their mind a little bit, but they cannot call out the hanky panky, in my opinion. And I'm not blaming them. If you need money to pay bills or whatever, go for it.
a
But
lot of
I'm just
people,
looking at it,
yeah,
hey, look, if you're getting money, you got to be careful because they don't need to renew your contract. Do you know what I'm saying?
yeah. So yeah. I mean, if they first off, if they break a contract, then that can lead to a court case. Um, I I think first off, Joe Rogan does have a lot of controversial people on his show who say a lot of controversial things. I think Aaron Rodgers was on not too long ago,
Yeah,
and that,
Aaron Rodgers, Dr.
yeah,
Malone was also another one of them.
yep. And so obviously what they had to say was, I'm sure in some people's view, controversial,
Yeah,
especially
it depends.
COVID, right? So on the bottom, on the bottom, it'll say for more information on COVID, click here. So you know, you have all sorts of different takes, I guess. I'm personally not one to shut anybody up. I think
Exactly.
a good dialogue is needed, especially in a free society. If you don't have that, then you end up in a very, very bad place. And unfortunately, I don't think that companies today are following that rule. So, that's just, I don't see anything good with not having a open and free dialogue, even if you don't like what the person has to say. You know, when I was growing up, if you didn't like what the person had to say, all you had to do is click the TV off, or go read a book or something, or change the channel. Today, it's if you don't agree with what I say, I'm gonna harm you in some cases.
Yeah, you're going to be canceled. And I find it where I have very opinionated point of views. And that's not, people in the industry don't like that. And it seems that either I'm attacked or people just don't want to deal with you. And I feel that sports cards, in a way, is becoming like our society, where if you have a different opinion, you're going to be canceled or you're going to be, attacked. And I don't think that's the way it should be. I think dialogue is necessary, but people don't want dialogue, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, I agree with that. In fact, after I watched that Aaron Rodgers interview, I didn't have any Aaron Rodgers in my collection at all. I think maybe 10% of my collection is modern, and so I actually went out and grabbed an Aaron Rodgers card, just because. And I went and I researched everything I could about Aaron Rodgers because I didn't know a whole lot about him. In fact, I don't know a whole lot about the modern sports. I don't watch sports really. I'm more of your vintage guy, and I'm a researcher and historian, so I kind of gravitate towards that. But I thought that his statistics were pretty impressive. So I went out and I grabbed that. So yeah, I mean, you can be influenced by this stuff, and I certainly was. So $5 here, it's not going to break the bank. So
Yeah,
um,
exactly. I mean, I was buying Aaron Rodgers cards a lot, and I was showing off Aaron Rodgers cards a lot earlier on because, there are things I don't like about Aaron Rodgers, but there's some things I really like about him. So he doesn't
I
talk to
thought
his brother.
yeah, I
So
thought what he had to say was really interesting, and it's just I always say this about about what's going on in sports at any given era goes on in America. So they kind of mirror each other. You know what I'm saying? Um, it's that's why this is such a fascinating thing for me personally to study sports cards, because I'm not just studying the card or the player, but what's actually going on behind the scenes in America or in Great Britain or Italy or wherever, So um, pumped up, lost its cool, and wasn't being gentlemanly. I don't. I think you're right there. Right? You know, I think yeah, for the most part, every time I've gone to a show, it's been very cool. I've never really gotten into any arguments at shows or anything like that. Um, and I kind of like, I hate to say this, I kind of stay in my own lane, if you will, when it
Yeah.
comes to buying and selling cards. And I obviously, Rebel, I use my collection to teach people about history and economics and what we
Yeah,
can
exactly.
in the future.
So we have a couple minutes left. Do you want to touch base on any other topics before we head off?
Yeah, well, so I was wondering what you had to say about maybe the auction houses, or anything like that. Or anything modern, because I'm really kind of, I think that if you're in the hobby, and even if you don't collect modern stuff or vintage stuff, you should still learn about that. So is there any like cards or anything that you collect now, like modern stuff or vintage?
I mean, whenever I get the chance, I'm seeing, I don't know if you buy CSG labels, probably not, but right now I'm getting Tim Duncan cards. I showed this the other day, like $10, right? CSG 9.
Nice.
So, and like all these basketball cards that were hyped up during the pandemic, Dwayne Wade got this for what? $20, right? $21. So this is what I'm looking at. A lot of people don't want to buy modern cards right now
I
because
can
the
see that.
economy, stock market's crashing.
Yeah.
I don't think we're going to see a run up like we saw during the pandemic. I just think that there could be a sizable bounce because everyone is cautious, or a lot of people are cautious. When a lot of people are cautious, I'm thinking, hey, maybe I want to take the other side of the trade, and then I'm going to look at some fundamentals in the economy and go from there. Look at some other markets that reflect collectibles, and then see, hey, could there be a reversal? And I think there could be, just looking
So
at some other factors.
So I'm right now. What I'm doing is I'm kind of shifting my focus into stuff that's not really collected, such as uh, soccer cards, if you will. This is actually Dennis Law, is a soccer or football Hall of Famer from England. But what I'm talking to over there, the guys and girls who are selling this stuff over in Britain, is that they're having a really difficult time over there with their pound, and you know, it's always interesting to get the point of view of somebody who's outside the United States, who is in the hobby, trying to sell this stuff, and um, I'm I'm thinking that for personally for me, I don't buy for for the financial aspect of it. I'm buying because I want to learn more about this stuff. But at the same time, I also want to ask questions about the economy and the cards specifically, and the ball players, soccer players, or hockey or whatever. And I'm very kind of nervous about the economy coming up, because I think we're already in a recession, if you will. I think we've been in a recession for maybe 2 years or so, um, and so I I think that it's going to get worse before it gets better. And what really could have a major uh, dip in the hobby is if collectors can't pay for stuff like food or gasoline, especially coming up in the winter in certain parts of the the East Coast or whatever you have, that could really hurt the hobby. I think what maybe would happen is that either you're going to see a sell off, or people are they're going to hold on to their cards and just not buy, or cards will take a dip because people, obviously, if they're looking for the hobby as another revenue source, which I'm not going to blame anybody for doing that. um, it, there's going to be there's going to have to be maybe a course correction somewhere along the line. Again, if it comes to it, between sports cards, food, and gas, which one am I going to pick? Right? It's going to be the food and the gasoline, and if things keep on going the way they're going, that the hobby could take a dip. I'm not saying it's going to crash. We've never seen a crash in the hobby. Not even in World War II or the Great Depression. It's never happened. But the thing is, today, Raul, we're in a different territory than I think we've ever been in our lifetimes. I think the last time we've seen something like this is maybe the Great Depression or World War One. So,
yeah, what I would say is, in February and March of 2021, I was cautious, and I said that, hey, the economy is opening back up. Now, as I've mentioned, a lot of people are being cautious. And I also look at precious metals, and they are subject to the 10-year tips. I'm not going to go too much into that, but if the 10-year yield starts rallying and interest rates go down, then the positive interest rates that we see right now, the 10-year tips, if that turns negative, that would be bullish for the precious metals that I look at, and also would be bullish for collectibles. And I don't think it's going to be that much of a run up like we saw during the pandemic. Right. I believe that there could be a sizable bounce. And once again, we see influencers are being trashed right now. I don't know if you watched The Great Curator. Have you heard of him or no?
I know who he is through you and other people, but I've never actually seen him.
You've never seen him? Okay.
Yeah.
All I'm saying is that he's getting trashed.
Okay.
Jeff Wilson is getting trashed, right? And when I see that happening, where people used to like them a lot, and the opinion about them has turned 180. I'm looking at the macro, I'm looking at sentiment, and I'm looking at cards I could get for $10 shipped to my house, like the Tim Duncan card, even though it's not a lot of money. I'm thinking, wait a second, here's an opportunity, because everyone is cautious. Some are fearful, and some people are being trashed. And that's why I'm thinking that it's a better buying time. But once again, it's not going to be that long, in my opinion, maybe 18 to 20 months based on some cycles that I'm looking at.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
Well, here's the thing is that, in the normal economy, going back to even say the Great Depression, you saw that the hobby, it didn't take a nosedive, during times of economic instability. What it did was actually go up. And so, we don't know in this case that, I don't know a crystal ball. Nobody does. We can kind of go into the past to see what will happen in the future. But this is all very different. And so I don't like people being trashed in the hobby. It's not a good feeling, even if I might not agree with what they have to say or what they do. I'm because I don't like to be trashed for my own opinions or what I do. If you don't like it, turn the channel, as I say. But you also have to kind of watch out for people's motives as well, and it's always the case with everything, not just a hobby. Do a lot of collectors have their collections tied up? They have a lot of money tied up in their collections. So I can kind of understand where someone would say, buy this, buy that, or sell this, you got to sell that. But when I'm hearing that, I want to make sure that they're not kind of like hoarding the cards or trying to sell off the cards that they're saying to buy or sell. I want to see if there is a a reason why that they're saying that. You know, the funny thing is, I just read a comment um, earlier that uh, you know, it kind of reminded me back in the especially in the 1980s, where you had a lot of modern players then. Their cards are obviously well, their play on the field would dictate what their cards should be worth, and that's the danger of modern cards. It always has been, just because anything can happen, like Mac Jones, and that's in fact what someone was talking about earlier. Was Mac Jones got injured, and I guess his cards went down in value. That doesn't really happen in vintage. So, it's always been the case. You know, uh, and I seem to think that you're going to get greater amounts of return from modern cards. But in my own opinion, I have found that you may not get a great amount of return for vintage, but it's going to be steady. And if that's the way you want to go and buy and sell cards, just remember that modern cards, you can lose your shirt on this stuff, and sometimes even vintage too. So stay away from niche markets. I agree with that, especially if you don't know what you're doing. For me, I'm not particularly buying. I mean, I'm buying a lot of stuff like this, the soccer and the cricket, but I'm not paying a lot for them either. So if I lose a little bit of money, I'm okay with it. It's not really. I guess you have to understand that uh, those kind of sports are they're not going to make you a lot of money yet. Maybe someday in the future, but if you treat it really kind of like a hobby, and don't have too many expectations, I think you're going to be fine. So
Very good points. Ryan, before I let you go, where can people find your work? And I believe people definitely need to check your channel out. It's really good for collectors
thank you very
out
much.
there.
So I have a YouTube channel. It's a history through cards shortcut, and then I have a historythroughcards.com, and I just actually uh, put up a 30-page article on uh, Benny McCoy from the 1941 double play set, and that goes through contracts and how much money a lot of these ball players are making, and if it's worth it. And some hanky panky back in the 1930s as well. So, if you guys ever have any problems sleeping at night, just go to my website and read one of my articles, and you'll be out like that. So
Awesome. Yeah, maybe we'll cover that hanky panky from the 1930s in the next video.
sounds good.
Yeah. But thanks again, Ryan, for coming on, and we'll do this sometime soon. Maybe one more before the year ends.
That sounds good. Thank you very much. I greatly
Awesome.
appreciate this.
Thanks. Bye.